Hello and welcome to Quizzy Monday. We have a good show for you tonight. No, say good. Why am I damning it with faint praise? It's going to be a great show tonight. We have got David Bodycombe, who was influential in the success of Only Connect, and we're going to find out more about how that show became such a great show, and lots of other inside stuff. And he's got a couple of podcasts that we're going to hear about as well. We've got Sam Swift, who we saw earlier winning Mastermind. And we've got a couple of the crustaceans joining us, and we will look forward to speaking to those. So, just to confirm, tonight we're going to be talking about Mastermind, Only Connect, University Challenge. We will be revealing the nominations for Quizzer and Team of the Week. It will be no surprise that some of our guests will be featuring in those nominations. And we'll conclude the evening with Champagne Moment of the Week. I'll get our guests to nominate their favourite moment from the evening's quizzing. It could be absolutely anything. And we like to hear what you have to say. So don't forget that you can put questions and comments in the chat, and we will endeavour to bring them on and involve you in the conversation. Hopefully, Valerie will be monitoring the chat and we'll be able to bring stuff on. Let's see, Valerie, can you bring on one of the comments we got at the moment? No. So good. The tech's working brilliantly so far. Let me bring it on. Catherine says, reposing on sofa to watch today's episode on my new laptop, feeling very comfy. Well done, Catherine. New laptop. Gerard, old work laptop. Goes back to the 80s. Wash hands, bravo. Nice catch from tonight's UC. I missed that one. But Alex, hello, quiz fans. And Michael getting in really early with his nomination for Champagne Moment of the Night. Surely a Dogtanian reference on OC has to be Champagne Moment of the Night. Well, there were so many fantastic moments tonight. I just from sheer humour at times, but some fantastic quizzing. So let's bring on fantastic quizzers and a fantastic quiz guru, quiz show creator, quiz influencer in David Bodycombe. So let's bring on Sam, Dennis, Elia, and David. Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
I'm going to pop that banner off so that we don't squeeze you too much. People know that they can put in comments. So it was. We had a couple of very, very tight matches tonight in Mastermind and in University Challenge, and one in Only Connect that looked like it was going to be an absolute runaway win, but actually tightened up a little bit at the death. It was thoroughly entertaining. When I was talking to Sam in the green room, as it were, I said, Sam, I didn't think you were going to win for a minute there. And Sam said, well, watching it back, neither did I. I mean, Sam, just starting with you, how you mentioned at the end of that, if we leap right to the end of that episode where you do your piece to camera, you said about the pressure. You were surprised by the pressure that you faced in studio. You've done a lot of quizzes. I don't know how much TV you've done before, but what was it about Mastermind that was just different pressure-wise?
Yeah, it was surprising, and it really struck me watching it back. A, it looked like I had dysentery, and B, one thing that really struck me was when we all started, everyone else had their feet on the floor, and mine were very kind of like brought in towards me on the little bar you get on the chair before going in. I was very much in a sort of defensive position, which I didn't really realize at the time. But I think so. Only Connect, obviously, you have a team with you, which maybe softens it slightly. Plus the fact you're going to get a second go, whatever happens. So the first one you can just kind of sort of leave it all out there. And the other one I've done is the chase, which is a lot more. Conveyor belt's the wrong word, but it's very kind of like they film a lot of shows in the day. You get there very early, stupidly early in the morning, and then they churn you through on that kind of quite condensed timescale. Whereas I think Mastermind is a combination of the sort of the prestige, the history, and the fact that it's an entirely black and white set. It's just the spotlights on you. You're looking Clive Myrie in the whites of his eyes, and he's just drilling you with questions. And it doesn't surprise me that the creator drew it from his experience of being interrogated.
Yeah,
because that is what it feels like. And as I said to you earlier, Gareth, I know what a cube route is under normal circumstances, but not when you're in the chair. You don't. So
it is very different in the chair now. Dennis and Elia, I think you've both been on University Challenge. Is that right?
Yeah, and Mastermind.
and Mastermind. How does the pressure compare? You know, with something like Only Connect compared to your previous experience?
You want to go first?
I mean, it was just more fun. Yeah, as Sam says, like the Mastermind experience is just a bit more intense. There's a bit less relaxing around, whereas compared with something where you've got a team of people, you've got that kind of relaxing thing. And also with Mastermind, the eternal grumble with thing that there's no way of getting through on high scoring runner up anymore. So you have got your one chance.
Really adds that pressure. And same with you, Ellie?
Yeah, I definitely found that the waiting to film has been equally stressful in everything I've filmed. But OC, once you were actually on set, it felt more relaxed. It felt more fun. I've also filmed a show called Very Hard Questions, which ran for a season. And that also felt quite chill to film, quite relaxed, a lot of gaps in filming. Whereas Mastermind and University Challenge essentially film in pretty much real time. And they're very breakneck speed. And you sort of are just trying to push through the panic. Whereas in OC, you have a chance to chat, a chance to riff with Victoria, a chance to chat to each other. It's just a much more chill and fun experience in the studio. But I would say that waiting to film, particularly when it's delayed, which is relatively common, is still very stomach tightening.
Yes, no, that is that. There is a lot of waiting around. I don't think people appreciate quite how much waiting around there is for TV. And as you say, the nerves can just build no matter what, even if you know you're going to have great fun. Now, Alex McMillan, who is in the chat, we've already seen, who is doing animal impressions, says it's David Family Brain Games Bodycombe. David, you were involved in Only Connect right from the outset. And you've helped create quite a number of other shows, including Family Brain Games and stuff for YouTube, which we'll talk about a bit later. When you're involved in those sorts of shows, do you have a sense of what sort of pressure you want to put on the contestants? As Sam said, Mastermind, World War II interrogation kind of thing. Do you have a view of actually, we want it to be a relaxed vibe or a tense vibe?
I see my role as being a bit like a crossword setter, in that you want people to struggle, but you also want people to succeed. So when the penny dropped, for example, on Only Connect, and I'm afraid I don't know who wrote this question, because it was a question written originally for the pilot. But I was looking through the pilot show, and this literally was just something with Victoria sat at a desk, shot against black, which actually went on to inspire the actual shape of the show. There was a question that went something like, snow in Manchester, coming home from the mill, the football match, and I can't remember the fourth clue. And I just sort of went, oh, okay. So on the one hand, they are all, well, shall I spoil it?
I see it's Lowry paintings.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They're all Lowry paintings, right? But then you sort of go, hang on a second. So what that's actually doing is it's actually saying, okay, if you know them, fine. But if you don't know them, then you sort of go, hang on a second, what's this to do with a mill, a football match in Manchester? It's even if you don't know these paintings, those are drip feeding clues to you to sort of go, if you put a gun against somebody's head and they know anything about any sort of art from that area, you would shout out Larry. And I just went, all right, okay. So this is how, because of course, the original series was a BBC4 series. So we had a lot more pressure to sort of put in a lot more high culture stuff than, we would never do Champions League winners as a sequence or something like that. And I just went that's the way we get people to watch a show with difficult questions, so that it feels like we are taking you on a journey through these 4 boxes of clues.
Yeah, and that does happen. It's interesting, and to me, having been on in series 2 and in series 10, see how the show kind of evolved, and it's evolved yet further. From your perspective, David, and from everybody else as viewers, is this a show that has to keep kind of changing because the general knowledge of stuff is going to run out, perhaps, or you can't fish in the same pond too frequently, and at times it's been more puzzly.
Well, certainly the sequences. There's less sort of sequences that haven't been used. So either they have to redress the sequences that they used before, or they have to make, as you say, slightly more puzzly ones that that are sort of just effectively plucked out from thin air. I mean, like the Roman numerals one today was quite a good example of that, where a very basic sequence has been dressed up to look like it was something harder than it actually was, and that was a nice little one.
Yeah.
And then sometimes like they've actually taken an old sequence and moved it 4 steps along because there's been such a big passage of time since when I originally wrote my questions that like they can now get a whole new question out of it because it's like being, oh goodness me, how many? I don't think how many years it has been since I've been on the show, but that's seven or so. I don't know, but yeah,
been a while. Dennis, you're about to say something.
I was going to say that Roman numerals question was slightly unusual, is it in that it did feel like that could have been in almost any series, whereas so many of the others feel really specific. The pop culture and that side of things has become much greater in recent times, and that wasn't there early on. But something that revolves a bit of sort of working things out from a sort of basic, slightly classical knowledge thing, which is possibly why our captain was the one who actually, I feel, put that one together from the two of us just yelling things out.
Yes. Which question was this again? Sorry. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was definitely one where I think they might have used that II picture in a different series as well, but not one that we saw until later. But yeah, it's nice to have ones that aren't too anchored to a particular time, and ones where you can take certain reference, like you watch the show enough, you know that Roman numerals are a recurring thing, but you have to like unlock what the setter was actually thinking, and so that I one like stumped us for a little bit, but then Alex kind of managed to put all of the various keys we were giving her together.
Now somebody's put in the chat, biggest question of the night: will Sam be wearing his smoker's jacket for the semis because he looked hot? Possibly not what you were going for at the time, Sam, but hey, you take these
No, Gareth, it was entirely what I was going for at the time. I go for all the time. No, I bought a new jacket for the semi-final. I can say where else, but I bought
exclusive
a new jacket. But actually, so the jacket I wore on the heat for Mastermind was the jacket I wore before I went on the chase and I lost. So I was like, right, this is either going to be the redemption arc or it's going to be the unlucky charm. I'm glad that I could redeem it because I do like that jacket a lot. Actually,
it would be a shame if you had to burn it.
It would, and it would be incredibly environmentally toxic as well. That thing is not made of natural fibers. But the shirt was new. The shirt with the hummingbirds on was new. I remember a couple of days later being in the Tesco's on Stratton Grounds in Westminster and seeing a man in the same shirt. I'm like, well, keep wearing that and keep an eye on the telly on Mondays. But yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I don't want to stay too much on sartorial stuff because we've got a lot to talk about. But the shows I've been on, it's been like no thin stripes, no logos, etc. And I see Dennis wearing a big logo T-shirt. And
please explain the T-shirt.
I did have a slight thing with that. So yes, it's my friends and I do a pub crawl every year, and we get a different T-shirt printed up for it every time. So I've got 20 of them at home. And yeah, when I first sort of produced it to the OC, they were like, oh, I'm not sure if you can do this. And I was like, well, actually, I've worn 6 of these previously on University Challenge, if you go back 10 years now. So I'm working my way through the entire collection. The idea is to get everyone on TV at some point.
Well, the no logos thing is really mainly for copyright. It's not actually because it's a design. That's it in itself is fine. It's just to stop the Rolling Stones suing you or something.
We haven't got around to copywriting the Down Mellor logo yet. No, one day.
Give it time. I mean, after today, who knows? It might be popping up on Redbubble and people making a fortune from your ideas. Yeah, and you mentioned earlier about kind of more pop culture in OC, and there were people complaining, as there always are on Twitter, about Mastermind, about the fact Detectorist was on there, and is Mastermind dumbing down? But I mean, we've talked about this quite a lot on the show, that the rigor of dealing with a TV show like that, and all the details and all the quotes and the cast can be every bit as deep as something else. Your subject, Sam, was huge. Elton John, pop culture, career that spans 50 odd years. That's a massive thing to take on, and to then do so well. How did you, well, why did you pick it, and how did you go about preparing for it?
Yeah, I was going to say it's a good job we didn't have a particularly colourful life or in a very short career, is Elton John. But so yeah, I think well, to address the original point about dumbing down, I think that the two best things any quizzer has ever told me are, one is no shame, only points. And the other is, if you want more points, you should learn more things. And I'm very much of the view that everything is valid. All knowledge is valid. So that's that. And that's something I believe in very strongly. And I think it's the only way we continue to make quizzing inclusive and accessible while still being challenging. Secondly, on why I picked the subject is because they wouldn't let me have Watford FC 2000 to present. And the natural next stop
Really?
was Watford FC forever. And that also fell by the wayside. So I was like, well, you like I said in my post-match interviews, where you don't grow up in Watford and not have a deep love of the music of Elton John, and that came next. And it was it was a challenge. It was harder than I thought it was going to be to learn everything I had to know. So I did just sort of sit there and go through all the albums and read his autobiography and that sort of thing. Apart from the two I got wrong, I think only one of the questions that came up was something I knew from the book itself. Everything else sort of came from just listening and reading around various things on the tracks. So it wasn't too bad, but yeah, it was more work than it should have been, but also it didn't feel like work. It's something I enjoy, and that's what it should be. I enjoy revising for the first time in my life, and so you can't really put too much of a downside on that. So it was big, but I wouldn't complain about it. I enjoyed it.
And especially having got 12, that's a good score. It put you in the lead. And you're right about, quizzing is changing, as it should and as it has to, and move with the times. And we've seen that in University Challenge as well, that the questions are diversifying. David, is that something as a question writer you're kind of aware of when you're putting together question sets for shows, that what was fine back in the day as a kind of a classic curriculum is now sort of not diverse enough, not inclusive enough?
Well, we tried quite hard, even in the very early days of Any Connect, to make sure that we avoided that situation. So I mean, sometimes we would do questions like a connection of like the first black woman to ... So sometimes we sort of got in not in trouble, but people sort of felt that we were sort of slightly riding off the back of other people. Other people's achievements in that way, but I just thought, well, it was just a good way of celebrating maybe some names that some people hadn't heard of. It was very, very prevalent in the picture questions that you had to avoid a situation where you didn't have 4 old dead blokes, or four old dead white blokes, particularly as well. So we tried hard as best as possible. Sometimes it was absolutely unavoidable, but we because the whole show was about reaching for different references. If it was a picture question, we would try and even do something like a person, a cartoon character, an object, and a piece of food. It's just to really make it look as diverse as possible.
Yeah, I mean, let's say it's from when I first did Mastermind through to now, and from let's say University Challenge over the time. We said we had Lillian Crawford on a couple of weeks ago, talking about what she'd been doing on University Challenge. There has been a noticeable shift, and quite rightly, I think, on some of those kind of prestige shows. We still, though, had a pretty classic subject, Sam, that Pete got on 60s politics. That could have been asked at any time in the last 50 years, or entire the whole history of Mastermind, and and he did very well on it. You must have been feeling at half time that it was, barring a calamity between you and him. Is that how it was?
At half time, I suppose so, yeah, because I was on 12, he was on 11, and you're naturally going to feel that. In terms of the subject, I don't know. I feel you could have asked quite a lot, because there were several general elections in the 60s straight off the bat. There were several changes of administration, and a lot of quite substantial national events that happened. And the thing about asking about politics is you can almost ask about any part of civic life. It can be related to who, which cabinet minister attended the World Cup final and things like that. So when he first told me the specialist subject, I was like, okay, I can see a situation where that's pretty prescriptive, but equally that could go the other way. Whereas at least with Elton John, when it's going to be the recorded work, but yeah, there's a lot of it, but what it is what it is, in more of a sense than that. Also, because I work in politics, I work in local government in my day job and stuff. So that was the one that was most kind of accessible to me, and I only got 3 or 4 of P's in an area that I found reasonably sort of, if not specialist, then of interest.
Yeah.
I don't think it was a particularly unfair set or anything like that. And I think that's the beauty of Mastermind, is that you can do this kind of tangential. I was asked who designed his Donald Duck outfit. There's no way I would have done that without doing homework.
Yeah.
It's the tangents it can go off in are where that's the kind of cat and mouse game between setter and answerer. And that's where it does come a little bit down to luck as well. But yeah, I think while on the surface it might have been a kind of more closed circuit of questions, as it were. It didn't transpire that way. It didn't come out like that, and that's to the credit of the question setters that we were all kind of level playing field.
Yeah, very good. Dennis, when you were on Mastermind, what did you do?
I did William Gibson, the
neuromancer
and science fiction author for first round, and then Trans-Siberian Railway in the semis, which all of my other choices were rejected, and I had to come up with something late. And yeah, it didn't quite suit me I had been on the Trans-Siberian Railway not long before, so it seemed like that would be a cool thing to do. But again, a broad subject, and the questions threw me a bit, because I'd mainly focused on learning the history, and they focused the questions were a bit more on the contemporary thing, which, I might have remembered having been on it, but, is difficult. There's definitely there's definitely an advantage of sorts to choosing something that's tighter. History is really difficult because it can be that open, for example, I think.
Yeah. And Elia, is Mastermind something you would consider having a tilt at?
I've been on Mastermind.
You have? Okay.
Don't worry.
What did you do?
I went out in the first round, which I am not ashamed of doing, because I was in an episode with Frankie Fanco, who scored the highest of any individual in that first round. I did my specialist on Toni Morrison, which I was they rejected a lot of my choices, including Colson Whitehead, which I was quite surprised they rejected, given he's just won 2 Pulitzers almost back to back. The Underground Railroad got made into a big Netflix series, stuff like that. So I was surprised they thought he wasn't relevant enough, but the chance to get to read all of Toni Morrison's fiction was super great. And the set was mostly good. There were a couple of questions that felt like they'd opened a random book to a random page, which, given she has 2,000 pages of oeuvre, isn't entirely reasonable in my opinion, but it was mostly a very solid, fun set to do. It was mostly us watching from the sidelines as a masterclass took place, I suppose.
And Frankie was fantastic, wasn't she, that series?
She really was.
Yeah, but what can you do in that situation? It's hope that somebody drops out and you get in as a high-scoring loser or something like that. That's about all you can do.
I think I got 16 or 17, so that wouldn't have happened anyway, but I was proud enough of it. But yeah, I think Frankie had only had a kid 6 months before, and so I think a couple of us were maybe she's tired. She wasn't.
So
Sorry, can I just come in on that? Is that
Yeah.
when I did the QLL buzzer quiz with Nancy Dickman, who won 2009, she said having a kid was basically how she won it, because she would be woken up in the middle of the night to do a feed, and while doing it would just read her book, and that's what carried it. So it's
I'll do it for you.
silver linings and turning disadvantages into advantages, I think is a.
Yeah. Plus, Frankie has Andrew as a husband who is a brilliant quizzer and worked ferociously hard to support her, as she did him when he was on as well. They're a fantastic team, those two.
I can extol the virtues of having a partner who quizzes.
Yeah, absolute bonus. Now, Sam, just wrapping up really on Mastermind. You were set 21 as a total, meaning you needed 10. Didn't start off so well.
I did not.
And we'd seen Isabel and had to really feel for her, struggling in her seat. Did you kind of feel like that was happening to you as well at that point?
Oh yeah, there was 100% a point where I thought, that's it, it's gone. I've let that go. There was. Obviously, I misheard the Evan Davis Dragon's Den question. I think that kind of threw me more than it should have done. And then got the one wrong about a cube route. And then there was the one on the Channel Island, which I kind of immediately got wrong. And then I thought that Rudolf Hess was a leader in World War II. So this is all of a sudden going swimmingly well, isn't it? But unfortunately, I got the European Union one, the Leon one, would kind of fell into my wheelhouse a bit. And after that, I could kind of pull it back a bit. But yeah, I think thank God for Elton, frankly. I did better than I thought I was going to do on Elton John. I did worse than I thought I was going to do on the general, and better than I thought doing a specialist, and it balanced out and just about got me through. That's what we can do. But no, it was the most stressful thing I've ever done.
Well, and you get to do it again. So
yes, quite. So.
But it's interesting you said about Evan Davis, because you misheard that. Isabel said she misheard oat as yolk, and that sort of thing can throw you. And sometimes in studio you don't quite hear the presenter's voice because it's kind of amplified and broadcast at you, but not always clear. Some people have better diction than others, so it clearly caused you two problems. Normally, people at home don't see or hear this. Nobody gets to say I misheard that, because they just do a pickup if anything's been garbled, and re-record that and make the presenter look good, and the quizzer less good. But did you kind of feel like you wanted to explain why you got that wrong?
Not really, actually. No, I think it was, and even now, this is the first time I've seen it back. So I was like, maybe I didn't mishear that. Maybe that would be grounds to challenge. No, I just basically I made the error of not listening to the full question. That's as much for me as anything. And I will not hear a bad word spoken about Clive Murray's professionalism on Mastermind. He was brilliant. He was absolutely superb. He was an excellent QM. And I can't sort of challenge that. Obviously, when you get things wrong that you otherwise know, you do want to have a bit of a right reply that you don't get. But that's the way of it. You know what I mean? I can't go around and knock on the door of every house that watches Mastermind and go, actually, I do know what a cube root is. My dad's a math teacher.
More's the pity. Well done. You're through to the semi-final. We look forward to seeing how you do there. Now we're going to move on to Only Connect, but before that, I just want to play a couple of quick updates for people. A thank you to our Patreons, and then about last week's winners of Quizzer of the Week and Team of the Week. Kelly Hamer won last week's What Is a Question competition. The answer was Sheffield, and Kelly's question was, unrelated singers Joe and Jarvis could both lay claim to be the most famous musical cocker, born in which English city? Well done to Kelly. This week's answer in need of a question was tip, and we've had loads of questions. You can now vote at tinyurl.com/WITQ tip. And voting will be open until Wednesday evening when we'll release the final list of questions. Make sure you're following us on Facebook and Twitter so that you can see the word that gets released on Sunday and take part. Congratulations to Joe Andrew, who you voted as Quizzer of the Week last week for his performance on Mastermind. Second was Matthew Bliss and Jenna Carolyn for their performance in Connections Online Quiz League. And third was Pat Gibson. Team of the Week was Ethical Mind Collective for their top scoring performance in the Online Quiz League. Second was Harlequins from Only Connect. And third was Banana Splits. You can send in nominations for Quiz or Team of the Week to tinyurl.com/ATQ nominations. Nominations close at 5 p.m. each Monday UK time. You can nominate any quizzer for any event or any team for any quiz. So we're back after those messages and Only Connect. Now, crustaceans, are you or have you ever been crabs?
Maybe.
It's not necessarily about whether we are crabs now, and more that in the end, everything will be crab due to the process of carcinization.
That is a great answer.
But we did originally apply under the name crabs.
We did,
and we were told...
Victoria apparently vetoed it because it had connotations.
She didn't want to have to shout crabs across the studio repeatedly.
She refused. Although she then decided to refer to the jugadores as the jugs, so I feel like there's some basic inconsistency there.
Yeah. I mean, presumably, David, there's some kind of taste and decency stuff that goes on with shows like this, but we've had Victoria say "bastard" this series, and
well, I did a question about old dirty bastard on a question about dirty people and it depends on the tone of it and like whether you get away with it. It's sort of like, I mean, like I did a grid which had, I think, styles of bikini wax in it, and you know, it's a sort of matter of life fact that people have to go through, and it's, you know, why should it all be about men's beard styles? Sort of, so and then so yeah, it's about the tone. You can get away with some stuff as long as you don't sort of as long as there's some kind of justification that behind it. It's that you're not doing it for like a carry-on laugh, but that it's actually a decent connection, and also maybe has some really good words that spins off for the whole grid. So,
I mean, the reason I asked about crabs is obviously there is a Connections Online Quiz League team crabs, who I believe you play for, along with the fantastic Emma Laslett, who of course has already been on Only Connect, so presumably couldn't appear with you.
That was the thing of the online team. It was myself, Emma, and Martel, who's also been on previously as a LARPer. And so we now have the complicated thing where I'm both a crustacean and a crab, and Alex and Eli are decapods who are in the Connections Online Quiz League now.
Yes, the crabs, I believe, took a season off because Martel now writes for Cockle, but Emma wanted to keep doing it, and Alex and I wanted to get started. So Emma has now joined us two, and we are now the decapods. So the crab extended universe continues to expand.
That is wonderful, and you know, crabs were a formidable team. Won the first two, is it? Well, first three of the Connections Online.
We've got one trophy each.
Yeah. So you know, you come with a fine pedigree, both of you, in all your quizzing. When you're faced with like rounds 1 and 2, which couldn't have gone that much better, certainly round 1, what were the questions that stood out to you watching it back?
It was nice. Was it the first one out? We had the Friends one.
The first one was Friends, and that was a nice intro.
Because it wasn't an absolutely guaranteed one, but it just felt like a nice start. Right. Something we got in early on, and yeah, no, that's really nice.
It's also really clever play, though, I thought, because there was the let's offer less information and elaborate if we need to. rather than going all in on one.
What was cut out during the program is we spent a little while debating whether they were specifically Monica's jobs, because we knew Monica had been a chef and also had been a waitress, like not in the main coffee shop, I think, but like had just been a waitress in general. And we decided that putting the general characters made more sense.
I think that's definitely a quiz experience kind of, and watching the show, but also just the experience for the thing kind of thing that, yes, give a more general answer if you can, and you can follow up if needs be.
David, if they'd have gone in and said things that Monica and Friends has done after 2, presumably when you're writing these questions, you've got guidance of what can and can't be accepted. And sometimes we've had things which the connection fits part of the way through, but later on doesn't, but it's still allowed. What sort of route did you take on early answers that are correct with what you've seen, but not with all the clues?
Well, as far as I possibly could, I tried to make clue 1 relatively unusual, so that the likelihood of, say, there being a connection between 1 and 2 was sort of hopefully fairly low. However, we had a sort of house rule, which I think has been semi-formalized since my time, which was that if you buzz in on clue 1 or 2, you're sort of just taking a gamble. But by clue 3, especially with sequence questions, the thing should be, even if possible, question clue 2, the sequence should be relatively fixed. It's not always possible, and sometimes there's some sequences that are more of a giveaway on clue 1 than others, but equally it all seems to kind of work out in the wash somehow. And there's only 3 questions for each side. It's really hard to make everything completely fair, which is why at the end of the day you have that the board is key. I can absolutely genuinely tell you that the questions generally are hidden behind those spaces each. We don't sort of say they're going to get those 3 questions, they're going to get these 2 questions, because that would drive me up the bend trying to make sure that these things are fair, because they really aren't fair. It's very, very hard to make 3 questions fair for each team.
So it's bad luck if you end up with a stinker of a question. And
I mean, I actually said to them, I'd rather not know anything about the people coming through the door, so that I can just sort of randomly associate packs to things. And it's only a couple of times they said, "Oh, we've got a girl Cub Scout leader who's coming in, and you've got a missing vowel set on Cub Scout badges. Would you mind sort of shuffling that off to a different show?" But by and large, we just let fate take its course.
Yeah. One thing I loved in that first round, and I think it was Alex, was on the Jeffrey, the Marys, was the explaining the answers and the comment about Jeffrey Archer. Also, he's a criminal.
Yes, I was.
With the brief pause, convicted, so it's all right. That's not.
We're not slandering anyone. Yeah, I mean, I've worked in a book shop the past few years, so I was like, he's that author and the former MP. And I wasn't going to mention the whole jail thing, but Alex happily supplied it.
And he's number 3 in the charts right now as well. Like, people are still buying his books.
He's always number 3 in the charts. That man never stops putting out books. He takes up an entire shelf in the bookstore I used to work at.
Yeah.
Mr. Brightside of terrible novel writing.
With his apprentice Nadine Dorris working to catch up.
Someone must have done him for Mastermind, because he's had an interesting career.
No, they've done him for perjury.
Well done.
Thank you.
But what I like about a comment like "also he's a criminal," it's the sharpness, it's the presence of mind, and it's that feeling of being able to throw out a witticism on set and on camera that you don't get on many shows. You do occasionally on University Challenge when there's some discussions, but there's something about Only Connect which does free people to have a little bit of fun, I think.
We've got enough time on the question. Obviously, you've got time pressure, but you are still brainstorming a little bit. So something like that can come in. Whereas most other shows, you are like, we've just got to get to the answer immediately.
Okay.
I think it's the fact that the conferring is kind of a key part of the answering process in Only Connect. Do you know what I mean? It's three brains coming together as one in a way that University Challenge even isn't. You know, you do your bit, you're conferring on the bonuses, but it's less.
Yeah, there's not actually that much conferring of that sort of working the answer out on University Challenge. You're trying to decide if 2 or 3 of you put in different answers, which is the right one.
Which is the right, yeah. But
you're
like,
unlikely
essentially,
to
you
get...
know it or you don't for most UC questions.
Yeah. Whereas on Only Connect, if Dennis knows what clue 1 is and Elia knows what clue 2 is, and then you bring that together and
yeah, there was a lot of, I mean, like obviously nothing about our next round, although we know we have one, but it felt like very much we gelled as a team in terms of it tended to be sometimes like, I mean, you can see in that match that Dennis had a very good showing and managed to pull a couple questions, like pretty much is just his own knowledge. But in general, usually we were all supplying pieces of the puzzle.
I think we saw that, and you know, different people chipping in, and you know, there's something like as soon as you see Dweezil, my mind went to Moon Unit straight away because I only know one Dweezil.
That was the one that and the 24 one where I just felt quite sorry for them because the other team just didn't recognize any of the items.
Yeah, it was really rough. It was just it's a cultural reference where you're completely locked out if you haven't seen.
I'm quite pleased as a pair of things that I know about 24 and Frank Zappa's children feel strange.
There's one tip I can give people about Only Connect in the modern era, which is that their computer system now is able to render the clue boxes in a lot more flexible way than we were able to in the early days, which means that there's much more questions where the layout of the question might actually be more relevant to the way in which because they actually use, believe it or not, those 4 things at the bottom of the screen are actually now mini web pages. They use HTML so that they can change the font color, the size, the positioning, and all sorts of other stuff. So when you're looking at something like the 30 days Hath question, which is actually something we've done as a basic months question in the past, the fact now, the reason why I got that earlier than the teams was because I thought, hang on a second, they're using the layout of the boxes as part of the crypticness, and that's a more of a common theme that you will see in the more recent series than my era. Because in my era, if I wanted the word over to the left hand side, I literally had to Photoshop it and put it in as a graphic.
It's funny because that's weirdly it's good that things have advanced in that fashion, but then that's also using something that's quite old. But moving stuff around on a web page screen is. I was doing that 25 years ago. It's both new and but
you're using it right now, and it's very flexible. So it stood the test of time, rather than the sort of very very specific rigid system that we had at the early days.
So I mean, and again, we saw one in the lightsabers one, which is almost kind of a classic your era one of why is that word in that color.
I remember one where we had like colored seeds, like it was sort of Incheon was in yellow and that sort of thing. So that I suppose that is fairly reminiscent of that kind of idea.
It's a little harder to discern the colors in person than I expected it to be.
The red and pink and orange it's hard to tell which one it is from there. It's really
famously the worst one, and this is always a trouble when you're doing snooker sequences, is brown. Brown television screens can't actually render brown particularly well. And there's a video on it, which it's on YouTube, about where they basically explain that brown on a computer monitor is really just a dark orange, believe it or not. So it's just because the proper brown is just not in the gamut of an LED screen, and so sometimes I would have to sort of like whisper in people's ears as to say, look, wait, on the next question you're going to get, the first number is actually supposed to be brown, and it's any way of doing it fairly. And that was often, like I say, a celebrity series or something like that. Not I wouldn't really do that on a proper proper show, because that sort of gives the game away partly. But yeah, colors are tricky. That thing about the is it the purple lightsaber? Apparently, he wanted that one because he wanted to be able to spot himself in a large fight sequence. So by having a unique lightsaber color, he was able to sort of see where he was at any time.
And it also makes him a perfect fodder for an only connect question. So win-win every which way. Crustaceans, any questions in those first couple of rounds that you're particularly pleased about getting or annoyed about missing?
I think we were all collectively, like, particularly Alex was very hard on herself about it. The North Macedonia question, like, we knew what was going on. We were just like tossing up two things at the end and ended up preempting sort of a thing that was being heavily talked about in the media at the time, but hadn't happened yet. But I think in general, like, at least my perception of it was there wasn't anything, like, we were happy to get the connections that we managed to pick up, but there wasn't any that we were sort of feeling really rough about missing.
Yeah, that one, basically, the one where we knew when you know what the answer, you know what the connection is, but you're just not quite sure what the answer is, probably the most frustrating thing.
Yeah, annoyingly, we knew what the months thing was going on about on Clue 1. It was just what they wanted to.
That actually was the same. We just the not being able to work out quite what. Yeah,
I think you spotted that the kind of game sense answer would have been November and November, but we wouldn't have known why.
Well, and sometimes it's worth guessing, but equally, you might end up with December if you've kind of misread it, and you're in that moment where you're thinking through so many different possibilities, or trying to think through so many different possibilities. That clarity is difficult. David, was there a question that particularly tickled your fancy in that those first couple of rounds?
Let me see if I've got my notes here. Well, not. I'd have to say I go back again to the Roman numerals one, because it's a really good example of like taking a sequence that you wouldn't necessarily find in a reference book. The reason why I kind of left after 8 series was because I was just fed up of having to go into a bookshop, go to the reference section, and look for any sort of reference work that looked like it might have some sequences in it, because they're really hard to come up with. And so actually there's some sort of perverse genius in coming up with a really, really, really simple logic, and yet disguising it so well that you can't actually see the logic very straightforwardly. And I have to say, because because I'm still slightly involved in the question writing process, I'd sort of chip in any idea that I come up with occasionally. I sort of was going like I, and so the twist of having it go to IV for the third clue is a sort of nice little swerve that was. I mean, I suppose technically on some clocks it would be I. But anyway, just slightly parking that to one side. That was my favourite one, actually.
Yeah, cool. So going into the walls, it was 12-5, 7 points up. So barring a catastrophe on the wall, you knew you were going to be in it when it came to the missing vowels. I thought that the scrummagers that really dealt with their wall really well tonight. I thought
it was a masterclass. Yeah, I thought, I think personally I found our wall more challenging looking it back than I did theirs, but that's a very personal thing as to like how much you click to the connections. And I've listened to more Bruno Mars songs than I have seen British engineers. So it's just a personal thing. But I thought like they seemed to come out of there quite quickly during filming, and now we know why. It was just very much a very methodical approach to the whole thing.
Yeah. I was watching and going, I'm glad we didn't get Bruno Mars, because I recognized 2 of them, but would have just.
I would have cleared that. We would have been fine.
It was a bit annoying. Obviously, annoying that we didn't get our last group anyway, but especially as you see it on the TV, that they'd had the same category before. So presumably anybody who's watching going, well, it's the same thing, isn't it? And they just can't. Which is
people think like it's simply because of that. Interestingly, with the vowels at the end, I kind of could spot it a bit more, probably because Maul and Pearl sounded like homophones of something, words for something. Whereas,
there was a nice in joke with the walls, which was a reference to the old BBC quiz, The Code, which I believe the current Only Connected question editors worked on. Which is sort of a nice little smile moment. It's sort of unfortunately slightly backfires if the contestants haven't heard of that that show. But
yeah,
it was,
but I had that thought as well. But because Leslie Brewis was famously in front of the camera, and the quiz folk behind the camera on that one, weren't they? Question writing. I thought there was one nice moment in your wall, Crustaceans, when Ellie, you said, try death. But I think, again, it's good teamwork. That's the interjection that takes your team to solving a solution. You need everybody to be chipping in, spotting something, because if you keep it inside you, chances are you're not going to be trying death.
I mean, in listening to it back, Alex was like, why are those 4 ending in L? What's that to go on with? I think we were all, because it was our very first episode, we were all like mentally like dealing with a lot of stuff, and like I think perhaps if we'd been more experienced, we would have been calmer and just listened to her and gone, right, that is the connection, probably something is up with that, and that's the kind of like game sense that gets you to a full wall, but like it being your first round, everything's a little disorientating.
And the time time
pressure,
watching it on TV, the wall can seem like you have a lot of time, and then
you don't.
It's really that was the one thing that really felt different from watching it. Less so in the other rounds, but on that one really did.
Sam, am I right in saying you've been on Only Connect as well? I mean, when you're watching it back now with the distance of time, are you having been on the show, are you kind of viewing it through different eyes now?
Well, having done it once and I've got all the questions that I was asked then, if I was asked them again now, a little bit. I think it has changed. I think, as you alluded to earlier, Gareth, I think it has evolved. I think the question set is different, for better or worse. Like, watching it tonight, I don't know. I think for me, as someone who watched it in the early days, it's kind of gone either way. It's either right now get things earlier or later. As it were, and I think without revealing too much about what my champagne moment will be, there was one that really drilled that home for me. But I'm really glad it's lasted as long as it has, and I think the longevity of the format has surprised me. I think you'd run out groups of 4 basically before now, but to keep it fresh and to keep it interesting, it's been really impressive.
I thought it would sort of last about a couple more series after I left. I thought surely there can't be anything after series 10, and here we are. It's like with series 20 on the horizon. So
yeah. Well, it's got longevity and it's got really good ratings right now. It's beating EastEnders and doing fabulously. So and games like tonight, help because it's entertaining even when it's not the closest match. The missing vowels, I think you split them evenly. 6
pretty much bang on,
yeah. So at the end of the day, when scrummagers end up with 21 points, that can be a winning score some episodes. So they're by no means a poor team. You just, that first round particularly, just blitzed it. Fantastic performance. So we will be giving a nomination to the Crustaceans for Quiz Team of the Week, and I'm going to play the nominations now. When I come back, have a quick chat with David about stuff he's been working on. We'll touch on University Challenge, and then we'll do the champagne moment. The nominations for Quizzer of the Week. Daniel Cohen for the Only Full House of OQL USA Week 1. Brendan Curtis for 7 out of 8 in QLL. Jonathan Gibson for 13 out of 15 in Mimmi as well. Sam Hayward for his performance last week in Pop Culture Challenge. Will Howells, who won Brain of Britain Heat 11. Dejan Kotiga, the individual champion at the Mirko Miocic Memorial in Zadar, Croatia. And Laura Kwong, 13 out of 15 in Pop Culture Challenge. Evan Lynch for 13 out of 15 in Mimmi as well. Josh Mandel for 7 out of 8 in QLL. Tonight's Mastermind Heat winner, Edward Stan, who won the Romanian Quiz Championship. Paul Steeples for 7 out of 8 in QLL. And Sean Webb, the only OQL Full House of the week. And for Team of the Week, the nominees are Be Real, who beat the OQL Division 5A leaders. All the corners are belong to us. The Geekiest Link, the top scorers in Quiz Nations Asia Pacific. Grey Monks for their win over Nomads in QLL Division 1. Johnny Kari Kina I Mali Zeus, the team champions at the Mirko Mircic Memorial in Zadar, Croatia. Dejan Kotiga and Perica Zevanovic. Dejan Kotiga and Perica Zevanovic, the PES champions at the Mirko Mircic Memorial in Zadar, Croatia. The non-aligned movement. Asian Quiz League Premiership's bottom team beat the league leaders. Tonight's only Connect winners, Scatterbrains, who beat OQL Division 1 leaders Motley Crue, Silmarils, the team champions in the Romanian Quiz Championship, and tonight's University Challenge winners. You can vote now at tinyurl.com/QW10oct. That's tinyurl.com/QW10oct. The link will be in the description below, and you can vote until Friday evening at 6 p.m. And we'll announce the winners on Friday evening. So, did you spot the bit that I was meant to edit out but didn't?
No, it was seamless.
Oh, genius. Yes, so
Nothing.
because that was prepared earlier, obviously we didn't know who was going to win Mastermind Only Connect or University Challenge, but in the vote now, the names of those teams and those individuals is in there. So you can vote now for those. Now, Sam has had to pop off. He's had a phone call. He says it will be back. But meanwhile, David, as well as your Only Connect work, you've worked on a number of other quiz shows, and you run a podcast. Is it TV Show and Tell?
That's right. That's the name of it. It's called TV Show and Tell. I co-host it with Justin Scroggy, who's a very experienced TV producer, and we have a mixture of listeners, some people from the industry, but also just people who are like lean forward viewers who are interested in how television works. And we broadly concentrate on light entertainment programs, game shows. So if you're interested in sort of our life experiences and us yakking on about how things were better in the old days or whatever, and we're trying sort of give people a little flavour of that, whilst also keeping up to date with the sort of more recent format news.
And you cover quite a lot. I mean, you're kind of playing it a little coy, but you've got people. I think you've had is it Paul Farrer, the composer, TV commissioners, all sorts of people giving angles on things that you probably wouldn't normally hear about with TV shows.
Yes, we've got recently coming up shortly. We've got Tony Gregory, who's a very experienced director, and we've got Andy Mallon, who's actually one of the casting directors. So if you're sort of going on these casting trips and he's sort of going like, why did they never pick me? Well, like he's got some very useful insights for contestants about like what they're looking for in contestants. And I have to say, I learned some things there that were interesting. So
cool. You got onto mute. Oh.
Sorry, just my Alexa's going off in the background. So but yeah, we've had Alex Horn from Taskmaster, we had Tom Blakeson, a very experienced producer, about Sue Allison talking about the early days of The Chase, James Harkin from QI. So yeah, all the episodes are free to listen to, and they're all still up there. All the back catalogue still available.
And another thing I think you're working on, because I saw it advertised today, is another podcast called Lateral. Is that right? You're involved in that?
Yes. So I did a show with Tom Scott, almost as like a sort of dry run taster taper for a game show not dissimilar from Only Connect, and it was about sort of trying to solve weird lateral thinking type scenario questions, and we always liked the idea of it, and we've had a couple of very near misses in actually getting it onto telly, and then of course the whole. I'm not saying that the whole scenarios change, but it's a lot easier for you to sort of just strike off and do your own thing these days with like everybody having webcams and editing software and so yada yada. So we're just going to do it ourselves. So coming from this, we've announced it just today. We were effectively just doing the lateral show as a new weekly ongoing podcast. So we have 3 guests each week, and like Tom will sometimes be the person that's setting the questions and the guests have to solve it, and then some of the times each of the guests has a question and they try and fire it back at the other person, at the other people, and Tom is therefore in on the panel, and he's having to sort of solve these questions himself as well. And that's basically it. It's we get through about 7 questions, I think, in the 45 minutes, and it's hopefully going to be a lot of fun for people to listen to.
Well, I can certainly recommend the YouTube videos, which were really good and still up there to watch. And if the podcast is every bit as enjoyable as that, it will be an absolute treat. So yeah, we look forward to that. Now, before we move on to Champagne Moment, University Challenge. I don't propose to go into this in depth, but it was a nice close match, going down to the final buzz. What were people's thoughts on that? If you managed to watch it, and I know sometimes after your show's been on and you're deluged by messages and whatever, it's not always easy to be catching up on University Challenge. But were there any kind of favourite questions or favourite moments from UC?
Well, my favourite moment, I think, possibly was "larv," which apparently we were putting a lot of effort in just getting the pronunciation so right. That and also the invention of the new chemical element diobium. That was a great one.
Well, that was unfortunate.
Did they mean niobium?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
that's rough.
But then when you're reaching for something, it's tricky.
There was some. I was going to say there were some good pulls. Yannick Noah was a good one, because that was definitely one where there was only one player on the team who was going to get this and was clearly just trying to pull that, because I think
he
the
was
others were
thinking out loud, wasn't he? And it was just
the others. The younger players were like Federer and Nadal and stuff, who were not going to win in '83. But yeah, that was a good one.
Yannick Noah, famously, or well, perhaps not famously, the last person to win a major tennis tournament with a wooden racket.
Yes. Famously, if you're of the right age, if you're a little younger,
age, yeah. That's why I qualified famously, because probably now there's not that many people who know.
We also had a single that charted in France called Encore, as in we run, but obviously in English it looks like on court. There's a nice little.
Oh, nice.
Yannick Noah dualism for you there.
So
there's my Yannick Noah fact for you for the evening. Yeah.
So if we could have 2 more facts, we could have an OC round 1 connection, couldn't we?
I have nothing else about Yannick Noah.
But they felt like a decent team, St Andrews, if a little. Didn't quite gel. Yeah.
There was a moment when Anisimova, or 2 moments when Anisimova really put her foot down, which I thought was good to kind of assert her answer, because I mean, I've not been on University Challenge, but I know sometimes in team quizzing, if you throw something out and it kind of gets ignored, it's very easy to just retreat and not put it out there again. And I was really impressed by her and slapping down when somebody suggested Franz Liszt. No, he's Hungarian. She was just in there. I was very impressed by her. And again, the questions, this is the 3rd week running. We started off with a bonus set on women, female, based on the female photographer this time, or linked to her. Thought that was pretty good. And then you got the John Waters stuff. I'm just waiting for the Twitter thing when Lillian says I wrote these sets, because I start kind of predicting hers now. John Waters, I'm putting some money on. But I thought it was a good match. The only one I didn't like was the tedious maths questions about this to the power of that, and
it was slightly unfortunate. There were 2 of them. The second starter, which was basically the same work out the powers question, was a little unfortunate to have that after the first one. Yeah.
Anybody else have anything leap out at them? I thought they say a close match, not a high scoring match, but it goes down to last. last question. That's always good.
I thought the Commonwealth minus EU countries one was a decent answer. I mean, like I'd have a guess at the EU one, but the Commonwealth one, to get that within one either way was pretty impressive.
I happened to yell out the same number as they did and be one out, and I was like, well, I'm quite pleased with that because that was a bit of a guess. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's a shame we haven't got anybody on from either of those teams. You know, it remains to be seen whether Gonville and Keys get through. It feels like a low-scoring series. Whether 120, I don't know, might be on the cusp from what we've seen. So, champagne moment of the night can be anything. Could be something that you were involved with. Could be something somebody else was involved with. Could be a question. Could be an answer. David, let's start with you.
I was just looking forward to seeing the John Waters version of Footloose, because that'd be quite something. So it's always tricky, isn't it, with these sort of questions of like before my day? But like that really was one where I don't think they had they didn't tune into the style of director that he was. But
yeah,
that made me chuckle.
So that's your Sam. How about you?
I think one or two from Only Connect. I think I really enjoyed from Missing Vowels. Eli getting was it "Can you hear me? But I can hear you, but I can't see you."
I think that one wasn't me. Mine was the link is in the chat. I think it was the
link
other
in the
one got.
Yeah.
I can hear you, see you, but I can't hear you. Which is fun.
But I think what just about pips it is just watching the Frank Zappa kids come in, and then Dweezil comes in. It's like, right, where do I know Dweezil from? And Dennis looking like it's the most natural thing in the world. Yes, Moon Unit. Of course, it's Moon Unit. I enjoyed that a lot. It was good.
Dennis, how about you?
Well, I it's not even necessarily about the question itself, but I just like a D'Artagnan reference. It's just nice having those kind of things. D'Artagnan and Willy Fogg.
Yeah. D'Artagnan came up in something else we were watching earlier. Oh, Chase the Case. A repeat of Chase the Case today. And lastly, but not least, Eli.
Yeah, I think D'Artagnan has to take it for me. Like, I was nowhere on the actual question, but just it was kind of a joy to have that sort of cultural reference on OC.
Catherine Burkett agrees. Oh, hang on. That's Gerard. Catherine, D'Artagnan getting mentioned is my champagne moment. And we have a couple of comments about Yannick Noah. Father's football son in the NBA. So something about Yannick Noah's.
So it's a sporting family.
Here we are. Yannick Noah has a son and father in other sports. His father was football, his son in the NBA. So that's another Yannick Noah fact for the list. Muskehounds are always ready for questions on D'Artagnan. Really is one for a certain generation. I don't know. I think mine was seeing Herr Flick come up and knowing exactly who it was and still not being able to think what could the connection be with Herr or Flick, and became obvious. And then it was like, oh, that's Port Stanley, but it wasn't until I saw David Bowie that it was like, oh, for God's sake. And I think for me that kind of is a good OC question where I looked in and thought I should have got that earlier, or I could have got that earlier, but I didn't. You guys picked it up for a bonus, but I just like that one. The Herr Flick thing again, taking me back.
It's a nice pitch level of clues because Bread are a band who I am aware of, but not immediately recognisable. I would feel for most people.
Yeah, but I have to say, I think my absolute favourite was Victoria's dig at Boris Johnson on that.
That was so good.
House clue. It could have been Boris this or Boris that or Boris that, etc. I just, a gratuitous little dig like that. I think that will have played well with the audience. So, thank you so much. Oh, here we are. Gerard backing me up. Flick and Stanley didn't see until Bowie. Thanks so much for coming on, Sam, on particularly short notice. But the rest of you really appreciate it. And And everybody watching and commenting in the chat. Sorry, we haven't got our secondary tech sorted out perfectly yet. We'll try and work that out for next time to be able to bring more of these comments into the chat. Don't forget, we've got what is the question? Vote for that at tinyurl.com/WITQ tip. And you can vote for the winners of Quizzer of the Week and Quiz Team of the Week at tinyurl.com/QW10oct. And voting is open till Friday. Don't forget, we have lunchtime quiz time every day at 12 till 2. And that's on Facebook and Twitter. And we have a bunch of videos which I'm going to play you out with a very short clip on. But for now, just want to say thanks so much to Sam, Dennis, David, and Eli. Thanks so much for coming on. And we will be back next week to chat about more stuff about Quizzy Monday. So until then, see you all. Goodbye.
Bye.
Are you up to date with the latest videos on all things quiz? We have our latest Quiz Academy video on the periodic table. We have a review of the pub quiz book. Should you buy it? Is it any good? Watch the video and find out. And recently, we just released a special for World Mental Health Day about mental health and quizzing. Make sure you're subscribed to All Things Quiz so that you don't miss out on any of these videos. Also, follow us on Twitter, and if you can, please support us on Patreon.